All right, so in 5.5, all we talked about was the inequality basically in a triangle. Two things. One is that the largest, well, three things. The largest angle would be opposite the largest side, and vice versa. The largest side would be opposite the largest angle, and then in order from smallest to largest, just like that. And then we talked about that the triangle inequality theorem, which says that the sum of any two sides of a triangle has to be greater than the length of the third side. So those were the three major things in this section. So this one says in exercises 1 and 2, list the sides or angles in order from least to greatest. So I obviously want you to list the ones that are not already there. If the angles are there, then you're giving me the sides. So for number 1, what's the smallest side? AB, and then BC, and then AC. And then for 2, they're giving you the sides, so you want to do the angles. What's the smallest angle? R, then T, then S. Okay? Questions on either of those?
How do you find the angles for
So you want to go opposite the shortest side, which is 25. The angle opposite is going to be the shortest angle. And then 30 would have been next. Angle opposite would have been T. And then 45 would have been the biggest. Angle opposite that is S. Numbers 3 and 4 say to tell whether the side lengths can form a triangle. So remember, we're adding the two smaller ones. Can 35 plus 18 bigger than 37? Yes. Okay. Is 3 plus 3 bigger than 6? No. Remember, it can't be equal. It has to be bigger. And then number 5 says Jeremy wants to build a triangular toy using sticks. He has one stick that's 12 and the other is 10. So 12, 10. What are the possible lengths of that third side, Chris? Perfect. Greater than 2, but less than 22. So the rule is bigger than the difference, but less than the sum. All right, so 5, 6 is actually called inequalities in two triangles and indirect proof. We are not going to do indirect proofs, okay? They're kind of silly, to be honest. When we've done them in the past, we never bring them up again on the midterm or final. So Mr. Carlson and I just sat down and said, we just don't need to do it. We torture you enough with regular proofs. Why throw in another one? Okay? So indirect proof, they're interesting. They say okay, if you're trying to prove this, then what you say is that is not true and prove yourself wrong. That's what an indirect proof is. So it's like if you're trying to prove that today is Wednesday and tomorrow's Thursday, you would then say tomorrow's not Thursday and then prove yourself wrong. That's what an indirect proof is. So if you're wrong, then it must be Thursday. They're silly. So we're not going to do them. That's the good news. Okay? You're still doing a proof, just in a very different way. So what we are going to do is this. This is called the Hinge Theorem. The Hinge Theorem says that if two sides of one triangle are congruent to two sides of another triangle, and the included angle of the first is larger than the included angle of the second, then the third side of the first is longer than the third side of the second. It's a lot of words for what it means. So I'll let you write it out and then we'll talk about it. And it has a name, right? So we don't have to write that big thing. And the name should make sense. If I do you know what a hinge is? Think about a hinge on a door, right? If I have two pieces of wood that are exactly the same length as another two pieces of wood, and I put a hinge in between them where they meet, and I take the first two pieces of wood and I spread them out further than that second set, then if I were to add a third piece of wood to that one that's spread out further, it should make sense that third one has to be longer than the other one, right? Does that make sense? So if I took two pieces, just take your hands and you look at it, right? So if I had my hand here, and then I duplicate this next to it, same length of hands, right? But I spread it out, I make the hinge bigger. Then if I had something connecting my two middle fingers, that segment is going to be longer than if I had it closer. Does that make sense? So that hinge is your angle. The bigger the angle, the longer the side that would connect those two sides. It should make total sense, right? Does that make sense? And it's called the Hinge Theorem. A hinge, right? It's going to open and close. So that's, except that you're putting it in triangles, okay? So if you look at these triangles that are here, it's saying that these two have two pairs of sides that are already the same. So you've got to have two pairs of sides that are already the same. And then if the angle between them is, in this case, it's saying that the measure of angle A is bigger than the measure of angle D. So the red angle is bigger than the blue one. Your conclusion is that the side opposite the red one, or BC, is going to be bigger than the side opposite the blue one, which is EF. Make sense? Okay, again, called the Hinge Theorem. And then we get the converse to the Hinge Theorem, which says if two sides of one triangle are congruent to two sides of the other, and the third side, so now we're saying that the side of the first triangle is longer than the third side of the second, then the angle is bigger, right? Makes sense. If I took and spread that door out by a longer piece of wood, or you took your hands and you spread them out by a longer piece connecting your middle fingers, okay, then the angle where that hinge is going to be bigger. So you still start the same way. You still have two pairs of congruent sides. So in this case, whoa, that's cut off. This should be J. HJ is congruent to LM, and GJ is congruent to KM. And then in this side, they're saying if this side, if GH is bigger than KL, then I know the angle opposite GH, which is J, is going to be bigger than the angle opposite KL, which is M. So if you've got the sides and the angle and you're saying the other side is longer, that's the initial Hinge theorem. If you've got the two sides and you're saying the last side is longer, so your conclusion is about the angle, then it's the converse. All right, so this one says, given that D is the midpoint of AC and the measure of angle 1 is smaller than the measure of angle 2, what can you deduce? So think about what you know about these things, right? If it's the midpoint, then AD is congruent to DC. If you look at those other two triangles, what else do you know about them? Matt?
I was going to say AD is greater than BC.
So, but how did you get there?
The theorem that's missing?
But there's one piece of the theorem that's missing. The reflexive side. So I have, just by what the information they give me, that D is the midpoint, I have one pair of congruent sides. The reflexive side is what gives you the second pair of congruent sides. Everybody see that? So if those two are true, and the measure of angle 1 is bigger than the measure of angle 2, or sorry, the measure of angle 1 is smaller than the measure of angle 2, then BC is smaller than AB, or AB is bigger than BC. You could say either way. And this would be the Hinge theorem. So we're proving about the lengths of the sides. Alexis?
Does deduce mean like what you
What can you determine from it? Yeah. I don't know why they use a special word in geometry, but they do. So if this was a proof in which we were trying to get that BC is less than AB, we would state our given. We would state that AD equals DC. And how do we know that? Definition of midpoint. We would state the reflexive side. And then we can go straight to the proof, and we would say the reason is the Hinge theorem. Okay, this one you're just completing with less than, greater than, or equal to. So in order to even begin to figure this out, you have to have two pairs of congruent sides and then information about either the third side or the angle where they meet. So I would use that this 4 is congruent to this 4. That's one pair of congruent sides. Where's the other pair? The reflexive side. And then this time we know about the third sides. So because 4 is bigger than 3, what would you say about the relationship between 1 and 2? Good. Angle 1 is greater than 2. If it asked you to justify it, what would be your reason? The Hinge Theorem, converse. So when we're talking about the angles, it's the converse. When we're talking about the third sides, it's the initial one. So this would be the hinge, if I could spell right, Hinge Theorem, converse. Alexis.
When you were talking about like going across, like the opposite side, before could it go over the line or like the bisector or no?
No, so you have to divide these as though they're two separate triangles. They have to be two triangles. So this would be the first one, and this would be the second one. It just happens that they share a side. Questions so far? Leah.
Like when it doesn't have like the measure of the angles or the measure of the sides, you just automatically know that since it's side 4, it's bigger.
So it's off. If it's opposite the bigger side, then it's going to be bigger than the one opposite the smaller side. So I don't know anything about the actual measurement. Like I don't know that measure of angle 1 is 50 degrees or I don't know anything about the measure. I just know the comparison between the two. But in order for that to work, you have to have two pairs of congruent sides. So you had to have the force on the outside and you had to have a reflexive side. Or if these was split, you would have had to know that that other side was congruent. So you have to have two sides congruent in order to even get to that. All right, so this says find the range of values for K. So first set up what you know about these angles. Do you have two pairs of congruent sides? Yeah, I've got the outside one, right? And I've got the reflexive side. And then the other piece of information I have without variables is what? The third sides. So what's the comparison between 18 and 19? 19's bigger, which tells you what's the comparison between these two angles. It has to be less than 38. So 5K minus 12 has to be less than 38. And then solve it like an inequality. So I'd add the 12 and divide by 5. And that's what it means by range. You're not saying what exactly is it, but you're saying it has to be less than it. Yep.
Is there any way to find a greater than for K?
Yeah, I mean, what can't that angle be?
39.
It has to be less than 38, but what can it be? What can't it be? I mean, no, it has, yeah, what can it be bigger than?
38.
0. Does that make sense? That angle can't be negative. So if it wanted a lower bound, then I would say that it has to be smaller than 10, but then 5K minus 12 has to be greater than 0. So 5K would have to be greater than 12, and K would have to be greater than 12 over 5. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so an angle can't be 0. It's got to be bigger than 0, which would be a lower bound. And then it obviously has to be smaller than that 38. Evan?
So like in the homework would it ask us for that?
I actually have to look at your directions. I don't know what it looks
So
like.
if it says
I'll look at it.
find the range, you want us to just put one of the other. Just the
You want, actually, if it says range, you can do both. So if it's in between this, it would be, and I'll look at the homework and I'll see what the exact wording is. But if it's 12, it would have to be, K would have to be bigger than that, but less than 10 would be the full range. But I'll look at it when we're done, which is almost, yeah.
Is this the Hinge Theorem converse?
So this would be the Hinge, yeah, the Hinge Theorem converse, because you know about the third side. Yep. Any other questions? Okay, right, that's where we're going to stop. Yep, that's where we're going to stop. So you're done with chapter 5, which means tomorrow we'll start the review. I'm going to force you to rewrite a new outline. And then done with chapter 5. Okay, but don't wait until this weekend to start doing this stuff. So you're going to do this assignment tonight for homework, and then tomorrow we're going to start the review. I'm not here Friday, which works out perfectly. Remember I said there was a day that Mr. Carlson was out, so we're a day ahead of them. And now they'll get an opportunity to catch up, which means you'll just get an extra day review. I'll do an outline with you tomorrow, start the review tomorrow. You'll work on Friday, and then Monday we'll go over last-minute questions. I'll give you the extra review, and Tuesday will be your test.
Is Mr. Faulkner or something?
I have no idea.
If he is,
I'm going to